Empire.
Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Conn Report wherever you get your podcast. You're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Empire Media, AMPIRE. This is a bonus podcast. So because the Washington Commanders, it came out today that they were not going to pick up Chase Young's fifth-year option. I think you've been listening to this. You know that that's where I feel this has certainly been headed. I didn't think they were going to pick it up. And I'm not alone on this beat in thinking that. So it's not like I'm getting some revelatory voice here. I'm not, but that's where it had been headed. So that's where we are. So I wanted to bring on Nikki Jhabvala from the Washington Post to discuss all the consequences of it. Couple things first. As a reminder, I will be back with the podcast Thursday night. At some point after their first round pick, I'll be on with the voice of the Commanders, Bram Weinstein. I'll be on Friday night as well, wrapping up rounds 2 and 3. And then I'll also again on Saturday. And then I will start having on some analysts next week. So just be prepared for that. And then also you can check out my work on ESPN.com. I'm going to have analysis, pros and cons, everything like that after every pick. And you can get that from every pick in the draft, folks. So go to ESPN.com for that. Couple things before I get to Nikki. There's one thing I think is a key point that Nikki makes in here that I failed to realize, that I didn't realize the change. In the 2020 CBA, they changed the wording for the fifth-year option. It used to be guaranteed for injury only. So if you picked up the guy's fifth-year option and he doesn't play well, you could cut him as long as he was healthy. You could cut him and there's no harm, no foul. You go your separate ways. There's nothing on your cap. Now it's fully guaranteed once you sign that fifth-year option. So if a guy like Chase Young would go out this year, doesn't have the kind of year you want, and it's just pretty good, not great, whatever, then you're on the hook for 17.4, whatever. That's not ideal either. So one, I think that's important to keep in mind here. It's a very big, I think, part of this, and it certainly leads to a prove-it situation. But the other factor here is I get a lot of how pissed off would Chase Young be with this. Egos are always involved, but I do think from an economic standpoint, one way that I know his side is looking at it is that he can basically get to free agency 1 year earlier. So if he goes out and has a big year, he's going to get paid now versus the next year. I think that when a player gets to that point, they'll realize that's not too bad. And in some ways, like it's not bad at all, because now you control how you go out and play, and you don't get the security of the fifth-year option, but you get to cash in maybe a little bit earlier, a year earlier, if you go out and have the kind of year that you think you can have and that they hope he has. So it's not like this is a done deal that he's not going to be back here. So, and I think it would have been hard to keep both he and Montez Sweat regardless of that fifth-year option. Even if they picked it up, it's still going to be difficult to keep them both around anyway. But I just want to bring up those points, and we get into all that stuff. We get into everything with it. So here you go. Here's my conversation with Nikki Jhabvala from the Washington Post. Did you know the largest ropes course and zipline park in the country is right here in the DMV? Located in the heart of Montgomery County, the Adventure Park at Sandy Spring combines climbing and ziplining to create an aerial obstacle course unlike any other. With challenges anywhere from 10 to 75 feet in the air, there is something for all skill levels. Looking for some family time or the perfect date night before football season starts? You can even climb and zip line under the stars. Would you rather keep your feet on the ground? Give axe throwing a try. With their projector systems, you can throw at traditional targets, play tic-tac-toe, connect four, or even hunt zombies. Listeners of this show can get $5 off any ticket by entering the code KEIM23DC at checkout. That's KEIM, K-E-I-M 23DC. So there you have it, folks. Climbing, ziplining, axes, food, and bonfires right in your backyard. The weather is warming up, so it's the perfect time to head outside and join the adventure at www.theadventurepark.com. That's www.theadventurepark.com and enter promo code KEIM23DC. Nikki, I wasn't planning on doing a podcast today, so I appreciate you joining me. But the Chase Young news, I think for you and I, we talked earlier, like we weren't surprised. Well, let me ask you this, your level of surprise.
Was not surprised. Now, had you asked me a couple of years ago, not that people were really thinking about the fifth year in his rookie season, but at that point, given the way he played, the hype of him coming out of Ohio State as a number 2 overall pick, it just seemed unfathomable that, why wouldn't they? He's Chase Young. He's playing great. Like he's on a good trajectory for his career. But, after late last season, and then, when Ron started to entertain the idea in February, no, it did not surprise me. It was a matter of time, really.
And it did seem like with Ron that whenever he mentioned it, it was always reasons why they wouldn't do it versus why they would. Right. And how much do you think for you, when I look at it, like it's the knee, definitely the knee. I think, maybe and I know Dr. Andrews checked it out and it was fine, but I still think there's some concern about that. But then it's also, how much do you think it goes back to before the knee injury, that 9 games and how he played? How much do you think that may be a factor in all this?
I think that was a factor. I think, off-field stuff is a factor too. I mean, off-season workouts are voluntary. It is Chase Young's choice to attend or not attend. I think Ron Rivera has made it pretty clear that he would prefer it if his players did attend, especially, at that point in 2021, his second season, he was really regarded as a leader. I think that kind of irked the team that he wasn't there for most of the offseason, and just, kind of how he's handled himself. That he's done anything wrong. It's more of, do they see the maturity? Do they see the continued development, the growth? And listen, he suffered a really bad injury. There's really no way around it. It was not going to be a quick recovery. I think by the end, they maybe expected him to be ready a little bit sooner than he was.
Mentally as much as physically. Exactly.
And that's I will never fault a guy for that. No. I've never been through that. It's that is a difficult thing. And the details of that are really between him and the team. But, I think it's an all-encompassing decision. And it is, it is not, it's rare for a number 2 pick to not have his fifth year option picked up, but it's not an end all with a team by any means, especially with Ron Rivera. He has a record of, rewarding guys when they do play well.
Right. And I think the other thing is too, and you brought up, like, it's really the word that I'd heard a lot was commitment. And are you showing commitment to team, to teammates, et cetera? And listen, I don't begrudge anybody going out and doing whatever they can in the position they're in. But when the team wants to make a decision and this is what they want to see, then that's how they're going to make it. And I think a couple of years ago, it was, first of all, you're coming off a good finish to your rookie year. Mm-hmm. But then if you're not seeing the progress when he comes back to work out with you, then you're going to start to wonder. Because I know, like I always talk about Deshaun Jackson. Well, Deshaun wouldn't show up for OTAs. Deshaun left $500,000 on the table to not show up. But what the players and coaches would say, and while they would all want him there, but they always, a lot to him, anybody I would talk to would say, he always shows up prepared. He knows the offense. So when he comes in, he's ready to roll.
Right. If you produce and you prepare, nobody cares what you did in the offseason. But if you struggle, that will come back to bite you. It always does.
Correct. And especially if you think that he's changing his style a little bit.
Sure. Yeah.
For whatever reason.
And that was another point. I mean, he went, in the offseason, I think it was his uncle, Bernard Joseph, who helped him with his pass rush, and he came back. And, and I again, I'm not faulting, his uncle or anything like that, but he wasn't the same type of rusher. He was getting away from the strengths of his game as a power rusher. So, and I think it took a while for him to kind of feel his way back, but he didn't have a full season to do it because of the injury and that, so it's a bit of circumstance. It's, it's him, it's everything. It's, but it's not the end all be all. It's just, not what anybody expected a couple of years ago, but within the last year, it seemed it was coming.
So one of the things that I'd hear, like whether on Twitter, you hear a little bit of other people talking about it, is like, what's this, is this going to taint hurt the relationship? So if he does have a good year, he wouldn't want to resign.
Yeah. It's up. I mean, that part is up to him. I mean, listen, they did exercise the 5th year option of Deron Payne. They did not extend him going into last season.
Right.
He was in a contract year last year. Everybody knows he was not thrilled about not being signed. I mean, there's, he even admitted, and I think there was a video that the team posted recently. He admitted he was not happy about it, but he went out and balled, and like he got, a sizable deal. So yeah, I think a lot of this is in Chase's, court right now. Is how does he handle this? How does he respond to it? But it does not mean a split, but ultimately, but right now it's not a split.
My experience has been money always talks in these situations.
Sure.
So if he goes out and has a big year, he can say, unless he just says, like, we've seen players here who just say, I'm done with this place. Mm-hmm. Trent Williams, but having said that, even Trent Williams, if they had paid him, he would have stayed. Right. Kirk Cousins, if they had paid him, he would have stayed. It wasn't that they never made Kirk Cousins an offer to test that, but he would have stayed because that was a price that he had, and I think they would have stayed. So it wasn't, so they never really tested that quote unquote loyalty thing, but I don't think Deron Payne was being loyal. I think Deron Payne made a good decision based on what they paid him for market value. But, so do you think that would be the case? Because I would lean toward, if he has a big year and they want to keep him and they pay him, I think he would take it. But, and it said that, like, we don't know until you're in that situation, but what do you think?
Yeah, I think so. Like you said, it's hard to know in like a year from now. But I think, and this is one of the things that Ron Rivera said, even in February, when he really kind of put it out there that maybe they wouldn't pick up his option, is this could ultimately cost the team a lot more money.
Right.
Like it sort of did with Deron, but he was going to get a deal no matter what. But this 5th year option was about $17.5 million. If he plays well and either they franchise tag him, which I think is like what, 24-ish million?
I think it would be, I think this year was like 19.7 for a defensive end.
Yeah, but a franchise tag after,
Oh, yeah.
It would be
So it's at least
22.5.
Yeah. So it would be, actually, I thought it was 4 million more, but it would be about 4 to 6 million more. Yeah.
So, I mean, if they end up doing that, if they re-sign him to a longer deal, if he plays really well, it could really cost the team. So it's a gamble on their side too, but they think ultimately it will in part motivate him to become a better player. And
here's the other thing, and this is what someone else pointed out. Deron Payne's first year of his contract is not 20-some million. It's like, what, 10 million?
Yes.
So if let's say, play it out, like, I don't think, Montez Sweat is a factor in all this, and he's obviously free. Right. I don't know that you're going to keep Montez and Chase, even if you pick up Chase's option, because it's still very expensive. Yeah. But let's say you wanted to keep Chase and you want to do something with Montez, but you could sign Chase to a long-term deal. That first year hit is a lot less than that 5th year option.
It makes it so much easier to manipulate the cap when you get them on longer term deals, because you can push a lot of it down the road,
right?
And spread out the signing bonus. So, this is also, we talked about, some of the reasons for it. Financially, this makes sense for them right now. And especially if they do want to consider keeping Montez Sweat. I know they like him.
They'd like to extend him.
Yeah.
Can they do it?
That's always going to be the question, and a $17 million, the 5th year option becomes fully guaranteed as soon as you exercise it. So that would be $17.5 million on the books for next year.
And that's for injury only.
I think he changed it in the 2020 CBA.
Okay.
I think it's.
Then I better double check that, because that's a huge deal.
Yeah, I believe that's the case.
All right, I'm going to double check that. Yeah.
But then you also got the cap hit of John Allen and Deron Payne. So you're talking like a little over 60 million, I believe, in just salary cap dollars allocated to those 3 guys alone. So is it that's a key point, because like, if he goes out, because here's the problem again, what they're operating on is the last 2 years he's played essentially, he played 12 games, but 3 coming back off the injury. So he's basically missed a year and a half. And those first 9 games were not what they wanted to see. And so if you're paying off that and it's guaranteed like that, it's really hard to commit that kind of money for that. Yeah, I'm looking at the new
Unless
CBA
you,
being exercised. The fifth year option is fully guaranteed.
okay. All
And
right.
the
That
base
first,
salary in the
yeah.
fourth year is fully
I'm
guaranteed.
glad you corrected me on that because that's a big deal.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that was a huge change in the 2020 CBA.
I don't know. I must have been asleep.
Way to go, John.
They must, I'll be honest, they probably announced that at about 9:30 when I was watching a show and I would have been out. So
Yeah.
sleep on the couch.
No, but I mean, either way, it's a lot of money, and it's always going to be a lot of money for that position. But when you're trying to manipulate the cap to try to keep as many of those first round picks as you can, you're going to have to make some sacrifices here and there. I'm not saying Chase is a sacrifice, but if you can wait and sort of manipulate his deal on a longer term thing, great.
Yeah, and I think that's a very, very key point, though, is that, and I would be hesitant to commit that, especially if you think. Like, here's the other thing. If you're not sure which one of these guys you want to keep at this point, if you don't think you're going to keep both, then why would you commit to the fifth year for Chase based on how the last couple of years have gone for both players? And while the perception of Montez inside that building is pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah. No, they really like him. I thought he really stepped up his game last year too. I think that he really came into his own off the field as well. But yeah, I mean, this was always going to happen when we have, 4 first round picks up front.
Correct.
Taken in consecutive drafts, and Chase bumped up his 5th year salary, remember, with that Pro Bowl in year 1. That adds to the calculation. Right. So that added another $4 million.
Correct. That's right. Definitely. So yeah, but I think, and part of the thing with Montez too is one of the things they like, the way they feel he's a good pass rusher. He hasn't been great. He's been good. Okay. But he really sets the edge well. One of the best in the league at setting the edge. Plus, those D tackles really like working next to him.
Yes.
They really like working next to him. And I think you can't underscore for the stuff that you hear from Rivera and Del Rio and about how they want their linemen to play. It sounds like the kids on a playground, but they play well together. They certainly did last year.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, they had a lot of games together where, just some of their moves up front. They have good chemistry, but they also play within the system. I remember one of the things that Ron Rivera kind of harped on after, the second year was, guys freelancing. But last year, those 3, and this is not necessarily a knock on Chase, but those 3 played really well together. They got a lot of pass rush games going that were pretty successful. So it was fun to watch. And you got to think if they can do that last year, they can, only continue to grow together.
And I'll be clear too, Chase Young is still very talented.
Incredibly so. I mean, you don't make guys like that everywhere. No. I mean, he's an athletic freak, and his rookie season is proof. This is,
yes, he was very good. And I don't want to forget that, but I think when you're trying to explain a business decision, these are the factors that go into it. They also know, and here's the other thing, and I'm sure you're this too, like, you get a motivated Chase Young if he's like pushing for a new contract. Because here's the other thing: if you're Chase Young, I actually would rather be in this position because if you go out and play well, you're going to cash in a bigger way. And I think his side has an understanding of that you now, like, instead of the team being having the control, you now have control.
Right.
And so if you're Chase, like, because people wonder how it's going to feel like, there'd be part of me that would say, okay, you want me to prove it? I'll go prove it.
Yep.
But if I do, it's going to be show me the money time and for here or somewhere else. So, I think there's that, but he is capable of big plays. We saw it.
Right.
I think, that was not a mirage his rookie year because he played very well. And so I think they would love to have that because it would make them better in a year. And here's the other part, Nikki, too. And I was just talking to someone about this, that if you're Rivera, you care about this year, because if this year doesn't go well, you're not getting the next year.
Exactly.
So do you really, how concerned are you about that 5th year option? Would you rather dangle that carrot out there for him,
Right. No, absolutely. I mean, just adds to the plate of the next ownership group, And all their defensive ends are going to be free agents. Some of their other top players are going to be free agents, and
that's if the deal is done by then.
Correct.
So, yeah. So anyway, but there's that. Do you the other part is the trade,
right?
there's really, I don't think there's any market for him right now.
But yeah, right. And right now his value's at his lowest. It wouldn't make any sense. Now, if he balls out and he starts to look like Chase Young of 2020, he could have value by the trade deadline at the end of early November. So maybe then if he's balling out, you're going to want to keep him too.
If he's balling out, that's what you want. Yeah.
Yes. So, I mean, you don't, unless you're the Raiders, you don't give up really great pass rushers. So,
yeah. And that's the thing is right now, because I even was texting with some people, like the knee is for other teams, the knee is a question. Yeah. And I think they, and plus like he's going into the 5th year and you're not going to pick it up unless you know for sure what you're getting. So I just don't see the value there for him. And I'm not trading Montez Sweat because I want to win. So, and I think he helps you win. And I think, again, a motivated Chase Young for this staff is not necessarily a bad thing at all. I do think that this is going to push him because he's like, I think he is a kind of guy like, okay, you want me to prove it? Then go prove it. And I don't think that that's something bad for this franchise. Right. I'd want to have a guy who wants to go prove it, and so is that bad? And now if he proves it and says, I'm out of here, all right, well, that's an issue. But we don't know, like you said, we don't know how that's going to go. I'll say this, I'm not going to assume he'd resign. I'm not going to assume he wouldn't because I've been around long enough to know. And again, some of these other situations, it was because the money was here and here. And like in Trent Williams' situation, he would have stayed. The mistake they made is they wanted him to show more on the field. And he's like, I'm out. And, they wanted when it was the old staff, he would have stayed if they had paid him. And then when it was the new staff, they wanted to wait and make decisions on guys till they knew him better. And by that point, it was like, he's just like, nah, I'm out. So,
well, and that's the other thing with this team is new ownership. You don't really know what the staff is going to look like next year. That could change everything for both sides, So,
I think the new ownership thing is a big deal because you're right. You would be saddling them with that debt on that. And then for all the Lamar Jacksonians, if he's a free agent next year, there's more room. So, so if that's what you want to do, but assuming that there's no tag or anything like that, and he's just actually free, or they're going to trade him, whatever, that's a whole other story. So, all right, Nikki, last thing. All right, because this is right before the draft, I did my draft preview. What do you think for that 16th pick?
Trade
we
back.
talked about this the other day, but
yes, trade back. Get more picks. You need more picks. Trade back. I could see them trading back, and I mean, honestly, it would not surprise me if they traded back, got a pass rusher at the end of the first round, like a Miles Murphy type. I would also not be surprised if they took a lineman or a corner in the first round and just collected more picks. That's what I would do if I was controlling. And if I say that, and Martin Mayhew made the good point too, of like, you can't just say, oh, I'm going to trade back. You have to find somebody who's willing to trade back with you. Right. So we'll see if they can do it.
That's always the key. But I think in this draft, if they could add, there are several places they could go. If they can add, that'd be better for them. But right now we'll just finish up on Chase Young. And where do you think this goes? I mean, you have
Chase or
like, how do you think this unfolds?
I mean, I could see him playing really well and they decide to re-sign him. The franchise tag is, I mean, it's a premium position, so you're going to pay no matter what, but he has to really ball out. So if he does that, I think you keep him, especially if this staff is still intact next year because they're the ones that drafted him. I don't know. I could see it going either way. I know they really, really like Montez. So it also would not surprise me if they, essentially pick one over the other if they can't keep all four, so.
Which would be difficult. And I know that they've at least mentioned the desire to extend him.
Yes.
But it's not to the same level that we would hear about last year about McLaurin or anything like that. It's more of I think they'd like to. I think if you got him for a good deal right now, you probably would. But if I'm Montez, I probably would wait because whatever you're going to get offered now, probably that same offer is probably there at the end of the year.
Right.
Because the market always goes up, and if you have a big year, you could really cash in. So,
and I think Montez, with his body of work so far, he's going to get paid no matter what. Depending on his production, it can go up significantly, and it might determine where he gets paid. But I think he's going to get big money either way.
Yeah. So, but then, and I, like I said, I think we could still see Chase Young have a big year. This is
Absolutely.
more
Yeah.
just explaining a business decision as to why they did this versus is he going to have a good year? I think he could,
Right.
and if he does, then they're going to all benefit. And I think they'll be a lot happier than they would have otherwise. So Nikki, I appreciate you joining me, and I guess we'll see you out at the draft.
Yeah. Sounds good.
That's it for this episode. Thanks to Nikki for joining me. And as a reminder, we'll be back with the podcast after Thursday night's first round with the voice of the Commanders, Bram Weinstein. So I'll talk to you next time.